All right, joining me now is CJ Holmes, who's covering the Golden State Warriors for the San Francisco Chronicle. CJ, thank you so much for hopping on, man. I really appreciate your coverage and excited to hear about the Warriors this season from you.
Hey, thanks for having me. My pleasure.
All good. Let's dive right into it then. Obviously, the Warriors coming off of a title back in 2022, regress a little bit back in 2023. What do you think is the most interesting thing about this team right now heading into this next season?
Man, it's got to be the Paul dynamic. Back on draft day, they swapped Jordan Poole and a couple of young players for Chris Paul with hopes of, shoring up that point guard play behind Stephen Curry. Um, last year the Warriors' second unit was arguably their biggest issue. They had the best starting five in the league by most advanced metrics.
Right.
But it's those non-Curry minutes that really got this team in trouble, especially on the road. So you bring in a guy like Chris Paul, whether he of course he's going to start tonight against the Lakers with Draymond Green injured or Draymond's back. That's going to be a whole other story. But
Yeah.
Paul is going to play minutes with that second unit, no matter whether he starts or not, right? And the goal is if you bring him in there, get some sure, point guard play, someone who can get guys like Jonathan Kuminga, Moses Moody, Dario Saric easy shots. And hopefully when Curry comes off the floor, they'll be able to sustain some leads. When Curry and Paul are playing together, it's also going to be very interesting. We'll get a good look at that, what that's going to look like tonight when Curry, Chris Paul, Klay Thompson are on the court at the same time. The marriage between those two Hall of Fame point guards is undoubtedly the most interesting thing to watch as the Golden State Warriors season gets going.
It's such a fascinating dynamic seeing those guys go back and forth for so many years and now being on the same team. You've seen the jokes. Everybody's seen the jokes that everybody's talking about. Chris Paul in a Golden State Warriors uniform just feels like a wild thing. There's been a lot of talk about him maybe starting. There's been a lot of talk about this starting unit that you mentioned at the beginning, how dynamic it was last year at the best advanced metrics of any starting lineup in the league. And yet the team seems to be thinking about, hey, are we going to start Chris Paul instead of Kevon Looney? Is maybe Draymond Green going to go to the bench? I'm so curious as to how that dynamic plays out throughout this year. Do you have an impression, like just what you've seen so far of how that's going to play out?
Well, Chris is definitely going to start, at least the first three preseason games with Draymond Green injured. Like I said before, when Draymond comes out, Coach Steve Kerr's will have to go back to the drawing board. When Chris first got traded to Golden State, in my mind, I was thinking he needs to be a reserve 100%. This is a guy who has played in less and less games over the past three seasons. Of course, the big thing about him is he seems to never be healthy come playoff time. And the idea of him coming off the bench just makes sense in order to conserve him as a player and give that second unit a boost. But, the more he's been here, the more we've gotten to talk to him this week, I'm starting to realize that it really doesn't matter if he starts or not. Head coach Steve Kerr, he's going to be on the court.
Yeah.
Right? He's going to be on the court no matter what. And head coach Steve Kerr hasn't been afraid to tinker with his starting lineups depending on the matchup. So I think that Chris is going to start a handful of games. I think he's going to come off the bench a handful of games. And I think it's going to be determined on a game-to-game basis which lineups work best for the Warriors, given their opponent.
All of it's in prep for a playoff run. This team obviously has massive playoff expectations year in and year out, given that you have Steph Curry in the building. Right. I'm curious, though, beyond those top six, which seem pretty solidified, there's still a lot of questions about who steps into those roles. I think the assumption, of course, is that a larger role for Jonathan Kuminga, for Moses Moody, those young guys hoping to provide a little bit extra, maybe exceed expectations. How have they looked so far, and what's the general impression of those guys as they enter year three?
Well, like you said, Jonathan Kuminga and Moses Moody, both of them are expected to make some sort of leap entering their third year in the NBA. But I'll tell you, man, Jonathan Kuminga, he's a lot of positive things about him and his development coming out of camp. This is a guy who seemingly had a strong summer. Every time he popped up on social media, he seemed to be in the gym, had a 60-point game at the crossover event in Seattle. And even Chris Paul, he just got here and he's saying that kid can really go, that kid can play. It all seems like it's building up to what's finally going to be a breakout season for Jonathan Kuminga. People thought that last season was going to be that season for him. However, for one reason or another, he just couldn't stick in the rotation to play consistent minutes. There was like times last year, when Andrew Wiggins was out of the rotation dealing with his family matter, that Kuminga saw an increase in minutes and he performed well, but come playoff time, he found himself out of the rotation again. This is a big year for Jonathan, and I think that if he takes that next step and starts to, fully realize his potential and put it together, it's only going to make the Warriors that much more dangerous. The kid is arguably the most athletic player in the league. He has all the tools. He has an all-star level skill set. But the key to unlocking that is putting it all together, and this is going to be a big season for him.
Going to be fascinating. We've seen the dynamic between the young guys and the older core sort of play out in Golden State over these last couple of years, and obviously this last year it shifted back towards the old core. Does this group have another run in them? Does this group have that extra gear now as Steph gets up in age? Klay, I think he's got a lot of miles on him now coming off of the 2 major injuries. He's bounced back a little bit, but the playoffs were unkind. Draymond has signed the new contract. How much more does he have to give as one of the best defensive players that we've ever seen? Just so curious as to whether this group can really tie that together once more.
Well, after the Warriors lost to the Lakers in the second round of the playoffs last year, the consistent message from Steph, Dre, and Klay was, we have more left in the tank. I think what Curry says specifically is, we want to ride this thing till the wheels fall off. And I think all three know that they have more to give. Stephen Curry dealt with his injuries last year, but, he was still at the height of his powers. Draymond Green was second team all defense. And Klay Thompson, despite the not playing in the second half of back-to-backs and the cautious approach to his usage, he led the league in 3-point makes.
Right.
I think that if, the front office thought that those three didn't have more left in the tank, then they wouldn't have signed Draymond to a 4-year deal this offseason. And, I think the idea is, Mike Dunleavy said that they want to bring Klay Thompson back too. At the end of the day, when all three of those guys are healthy, the Warriors are extremely difficult to beat. And I don't see that changing this season or even within the next couple seasons.
Right. Last year, this team won 44 games, finished as a 6th seed in the West. I currently have them at 47. I think that the addition of Chris Paul and just some added progression for Kuminga and Moody and guys like that, I think it will help them. I don't see them as, especially in the regular season, as one of those top line teams. It seems like they're going to rest at least a little bit, and they're going to do some experimenting, as you mentioned, with the lineups and trying to get guys as ready for playoff matchups as possible. Where do you see them kind of in season win projections and where they kind of finish in the West this year?
Well, hey, Ryan, if you're predicting around 47 wins, I mean, that puts them at the top of the West if you base it on last year's standings.
Fair. Completely fair.
I do think the integration of Paul is going to take some time, may lead to some early hiccups as Steve Kerr tries to, feel out his rotation. Kerr has he usually takes his time with that kind of stuff, and he's usually still tinkering with lineups even deep into the regular season. I do think the Warriors win total will improve based on last year.
Yeah.
And that's simply because I don't think they're going to be as bad as they were on the road last year. If the Warriors win half of their road games a year ago, they're a top 3 seed easily.
Yeah.
They're arguably the best team in the league at Chase Center. I do think the addition of Paul is going to help shore up some of those second unit issues. I do not think they're going to be as disconnected and disjointed as on the road. The big words coming out of camp this first week has been, chemistry, connectivity, togetherness, stuff like that. So I do think that it helps that they're entering this season with a lot less distractions than they were last season. If I had to predict the win total, I think what they win last year, like 43 games.
Yeah, 44.
44.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, 47 to 50 might, be on track.
Yeah.
I think they're an improved team compared to the team they were last year. Less distractions. Jonathan Kuminga is expected to take the lead, put those factors together, and the Warriors are going to be one of those teams atop the West.
Going to be fascinating to watch them. I know missing Jordan Poole wasn't fantastic last year, probably a drain on a lot of the minutes, but a guy like Dante DiVincenzo, missing him, he's going to be a tough one to replace. But hey, Chris Paul comes in, Corey Joseph maybe spot minutes here or there, Dario Saric, like he should be an interesting backup big man. Looking forward to seeing what this team can provide. What do you think it would take if there's one thing you could boil it down to that would help this team get through the Western Conference in the playoffs this year?
Defense and team rebounding. The Warriors weren't the defensive team that you're accustomed to seeing last season. You know, some people think that has a lot to do with the departure of Mike Brown to Sacramento. You know, defense is all about chemistry and communication, and that's something that the Warriors struggled with last year. Granted, it seems like they're going to this season with better vibes, and that should translate to better production at the defensive end. And they remain one of the smaller teams in the league. That seems to always be the thing with the Warriors every year. Oh, they're too small, they're too small. But, you know, in those championship seasons that they had, you know, that didn't stop them because they had that willingness to crash the glass from a team rebounding perspective. Right. So, you know, the offense is going to come. Steph Curry's still on this team. Klay Thompson's still on this team. Chris Paul's going to be out there dishing. Offense is going to be an issue. What's going to make a difference for the Warriors this season is their ability to guard and their ability to crash the glass at both ends.
We will see what happens with this team. But hey, CJ, thank you so much for stopping by. Really appreciate your coverage of the Warriors, and I can't wait to talk to you throughout the year, man.
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Ryan.